Have you ever felt like you didn't exist in your own family? Like no matter how hard you tried, no one ever seemed to care? Indigo, 28 years old, has spent her life as a shadow in her own family. Despite her incredible talent for drawing, she was always overshadowed by her perfect younger sister, Briar. After leaving her family behind, Indigo found love and support in her grandmother, Magnolia, who encouraged her to embrace her artistic gifts and find happiness. But when she attended Briar's wedding years later, all the old wounds reopened, forcing Indigo to confront the cold, indifferent family that never truly saw her for who she was. "What are you drawing?" Magnolia asked as she approached me. I was absorbed in my sketch, the red pencil moving smoothly across the paper. "I'm drawing the birthday cake we ate together," I replied proudly, finishing the glossy red strawberry and showing it to her. In front of me, the lavish cake stood proudly, surrounded by images of Magnolia and our friends, all beaming with happiness. A smile spread across my face as I looked at the drawing, and Magnolia squinted her eyes, smiling gently in return. "9, your drawing is wonderful. You're like a professional painter," Magnolia said, patting my head warmly. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of her hand. The simple gesture brought a happiness I couldn't put into words. I loved Magnolia deeply, despite the lack of affection from my parents. The warmth of Magnolia's hand was all I needed to keep me going. My name is Indigo, and I'm 28 years old. I love to draw and read books. During the day, I work as an office clerk at a small company, and at night, I immerse myself in my diary or draw comics, posting them on my blog and Instagram. I illustrate small daily life events in a humorous way, always striving for a positive ending. Even when I fail, I try to keep my perspective optimistic, both in my art and in my life. It brings me joy to see people resonate with my posts and leave comments or likes. My proactive approach to life is shaped by the environment I grew up in. I remember hearing a story about a famous writer who was approached by a beautiful actress. "Wouldn't it be wonderful if a baby were born with your intellect and my looks?" the actress said. The writer replied, "The child might end up with your intellect and my looks, though." The actress had hoped for a son, but the writer had warned of the consequences. "My father works for a major company in LA, and my mother was once a beauty pageant star. I've inherited my father's looks and my mother's intellect, but I've also inherited their insecurities. Relatives often say, 'You have your father's nose,' or 'Your mother wasn't good at studying either.'" These comments would only irritate my parents, and over time I began to feel like a disappointment. On the other hand, my younger sister Briar, 3 years my junior, was always the center of attention. Known for her cuteness and intelligence, she charmed everyone around her. Adults loved her for her clear eyes, high nose bridge, fair skin, and smooth hair. She was adored like an angel, and our parents doted on her, showering her with affection and praise, treating her as the ideal daughter they could never fault. Briar, realizing the power of their affection, cleverly turned it towards herself by casting me as the villain. When a dish was broken, she would accuse, "Indigo dropped it." If she neglected her practice lessons, the excuse was, "Indigo stopped me." If money went missing from Mother's purse, Briar would say it was because I told her to take it. I was always the one left to bear the consequences of her lies, and our parents always sided with her. They accepted the false narrative without question that I was jealous of Briar's excellence and bullied her, when the truth was that I was simply trying to stay invisible in a house that favored her. Living in this house felt like hell, yet I managed not to fall into despair thanks to the kindness of friends and my father's mother, especially my nearby grandmother. Magnolia always warmly welcomed me whenever I was driven out of our house. Magnolia repeatedly cautioned my parents, but when my mother vehemently argued back, blaming Magnolia, I had no choice but to mediate, saying, "It's okay, it's my fault." This situation visibly angered my parents, and Magnolia showed a sad expression instead. She poured deep affection into me, spoiling me greatly. Once, while Magnolia was folding laundry, she saw a drawing I made on the back of a flyer and praised me. "Indigo, you have a talent for drawing," and gifted me high-quality drawing paper and a set of 36 colored pencils for my birthday when they didn't celebrate for me. Magnolia prepared a huge whole cake. "We can't eat all of this by ourselves," she said with a laugh, and also invited friends. At Magnolia's house, enjoying hamburgers and a rich cream cake and opening gifts from friends, that moment of happiness was something I will never forget. My parents were aware that I frequently stayed at Magnolia's house. Initially, they were angry, saying, "A child spoiled by her grandmother won't grow up to be a good adult." But they quieted down as I reached the upper grades of elementary school. They focused on perfecting Briar, completely losing interest in me. The harsh treatment towards me ceased, and they began to ignore my presence as if I had never existed from the start. Only the bare essentials for living were provided, and that was all. By the time I became a middle school student, I realized that my parents no longer cared about me. Still, I hadn't completely given up hope, but when I was told coldly in my 3rd year of middle school, "We can't afford your school fees because your sister needs to take entrance exams," I finally gave up on receiving any love from them despite my father working at a major corporation and being fully capable of affording my tuition. When Magnolia heard this, she was so furious she seemed about to burst a blood vessel and suggested, "I'll pay for your schooling. You should come and live with me and go to high school." I intended to refuse, feeling sorry, but when I saw Magnolia crying, saying, "Poor Indigo," I couldn't stop my own tears and hugged her. Later, with the help of my homeroom teacher, I took the exams without my parents knowing and was able to enter a nighttime high school. I left home to start a new life at Magnolia's house, working part-time during the day and going to high school in the evenings. Magnolia said I didn't need to work, but I wanted to earn at least my own living expenses. After graduating high school, I left Magnolia's house and found a job as an office clerk at a small company in the neighboring prefecture, where I continue to work. I gave my parents my address, but they neither visited nor sent letters. We became completely estranged, even during Christmas. However, I finally managed to become independent and leave that house. I have always lived looking forward. Then one day, I received a letter from my sister for the first time. Inside the fancy envelope was an invitation to my sister's wedding. My sister, 25 years old and having barely seen her since middle school graduation, seemed to be marrying a high-earning man much like our father, capitalizing on our mother's beauty. Reuniting with such a family was painful, but I was the only sister she had. If I didn't attend, it might raise suspicions in her in-laws' family. I have been working as a professional for 10 years now, even though I am not the perfect daughter my parents envisioned. Showing that I am living a decent life might improve our relationship, even if slightly. I will attend my sister's wedding. After 10 years of estrangement, I casually posted on my blog and received heartwarming comments from my followers. With courage, I marked "will attend" on the invitation. The day of my sister Briar's wedding finally arrived. As the bride's sister, who must not be late, I drove early to the venue. The venue was an enchanting building modeled after a castle in a theme park, like something out of a fairy tale. Guided by the staff, I entered a room reserved for family. There were my aged parents and my beautiful sister, already dressed in her wedding gown. Briar, overwhelmed, I barely managed a greeting. They looked at each other and said, "See, Mom? I told you she would definitely come." I was taken aback by my sister's words. Mother exaggeratedly shrugged her shoulders like a character from a cartoon. "To think you'd show up at your sister's wedding after dropping out of middle school is beyond me." "What do you mean? You really haven't changed, still so thoughtless." Father, his hair thinned, looked at me with an expression of surprise. Even though I expected to be considered a nuisance by my family, I hadn't expected such a clear and harsh response. It was unjust to be criticized as insensitive just for attending my sister's wedding. "Briar, you sent the invitation, didn't you?" I asked cautiously. She smiled and frowned slightly. "Yes, I sent it, but even someone like you is family, so how could I not invite you?" Her usual sharp tone was there, but this was not the time for it. "So why do you resent me being here? Did you actually want me to come?" pointing out the contradiction. My sister touched her cheek and tilted her head. "Actually, that was true, but recently I realized it would be better to pretend you no longer exist than to invite you and have everyone ridicule your lack of education." What? I realized it just a month ago. I meant to tell you, but then today arrived. What does that mean? You behave as if I no longer exist, and you even find it troublesome to tell me? Shocked by this revelation, I felt my mother's piercing gaze cut through me like a blade. It can't be helped, she said coldly. You don't have any experience with marriage or a likely partner, so you might not understand, but preparing for a wedding is very hectic. We didn't think you'd even show up, so I told Briar that if she understands her place, she won't come either. Personally, if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't have the courage to attend a wedding. It would be too embarrassing, right? My mother's laugh was hollow, unnatural, as if she herself didn't believe the cruel words she was saying. Don't say things like that, Mom, I cried, the words breaking out before I could stop them. I always believed my sister would invite me. We wanted her to know she's recognized, that she's loved and part of this family, that she's needed. What are you talking about? Briar sneered, her tone laced with false sweetness. I'm sorry for giving you false hope, but don't worry. We'll remember you as the kind sister who passed away early from a brain disease, she said, the words dripping with insincerity. She looked at me with exaggerated pity, as if she were a saint for tolerating my existence. It's impossible that a lie made up so suddenly would be believed by our relatives and your husband, she continued. Don't worry, you haven't been in contact with our relatives for a long time, right? It's a well-known fact that you were isolated from the family. I've told them you wanted us to have a quiet funeral without overshadowing my wedding, only with family. No further questions. I've told my husband, too. He believes whatever I say. What a thing to do. My heart sank, the finality of her words hitting me like a hammer. Since graduating from middle school, I had barely seen anyone other than Magnolia. Some relatives had expressed concern for me years ago, but that was a decade ago. If they were told I had died, they would believe it without hesitation. In that moment, as I stood there in stunned silence, my father threw something at me. It was the seating chart for the wedding. Take a look at this. Briar is marrying into a family of doctors. We can't introduce someone like you at such an event. I opened the chart slowly, almost mechanically, and my eyes scanned the names listed under the groom's side names I didn't recognize, all associated with the title Doctor. Take it as a keepsake and leave quickly. You no longer exist in this world, my father added with disdain. The sound of their laughter filled the air, cutting through me like a blade. My father's mocking tone, Briar's cruel chuckles, and my mother's dismissive laughter all seemed to blend together into a cacophony of rejection. I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the sting of their cruelty, and rushed out of the venue, my legs unsteady. I hurried to my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. I couldn't get the engine started. My fingers, stiff and uncooperative, failed to turn the ignition. Tears streamed down my face, falling uncontrollably. A mix of sadness, anger, and frustration churned inside me, as if dark paints were spilling across a canvas, creating a chaotic, messy reflection of my mind. I was furious with them, but I was even more furious with myself for having held out any hope, for believing that, somehow, they might care. I watched through the glass as people continued to enter the venue. I knew I shouldn't be here, but my body refused to move, heavy with the weight of rejection. My phone vibrated in my bag, pulling me from the haze of my thoughts. With cold hands, I took it out and saw a notification from Instagram comments of concern and encouragement from friends and followers, responding to my post about attending my estranged sister's wedding. The kindness of their words brought a strange sense of warmth, something I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. Moved by their compassion, I opened the story feature for the first time and shared my vulnerability, typing through tears. My family has declared me dead. It seems I have no reason to live anymore. As I typed those words, the tears flowed freely, each drop a release of the emotions I had been suppressing for so long. I couldn't help but feel like I was drowning in a sea of their rejection, but in that moment, with my friends' support, I realized that I wasn't entirely alone. I had people who cared, even if my family didn't. Soon after, another notification for a new message sounded. Encouraging words kept coming in. Indigo, you are not worthless. Indigo, I love your illustrated diary and your warm personality. I have been helped by Indigo's diary entries. Cut ties with such a family, Indigo. These were all words of anger and sadness from people I didn't know who were speaking out for me. I had completely lost my confidence, but these words gradually began to sink into my heart. Then, apparently having seen my Instagram story, my best friend called me, crying. Indigo, hold on. Such an obvious lie can't be sustained forever. Act with confidence for your grandmother who cares so much about you. With these words, I suddenly came back to myself. For my grandmother, who cries, gets angry, and laughs for me, she must be at this wedding venue without a doubt. Just thinking about how sad my grandmother would be if she heard I had died stirred up anger inside me. I am not a worthless person. I am not someone who should be ashamed of being alive. The ones who should be ashamed are those who scorn someone trying hard to live. I took a handkerchief from my pocket and firmly wiped my tears. Then I straightened my eyeliner and quietly opened the car door. When I returned to the venue, the reception had already started. I secretly peered inside through the glass. It seemed that a slideshow of the bride and grooms growing up was currently being shown. The slideshow included photos of our family, including me, and at the end of the presentation, the host mentioned the story of the bride's sister who passed away from an illness a few months ago. This caused a stir among the relatives, and everyone turned to look at my parents. My father stood up and said, Briar's sister died suddenly of a brain disorder. She was very kind, and she got along well with Briar, but was worried that her own illness might delay her sister's wedding. Next to him, my mother was pressing a handkerchief to her eyes. I couldn't believe that they could lie so boldly about me, whom they had just been talking with. The guests were unable to hide their astonishment as my father, with tears streaming down his face, said, She must be happy in heaven. Excuse me, do you have any business here? A staff member approached me, asking with a tense expression. When I answered, Actually, my sister asked me to do this surprise. Are you referring to the bride as your sister? The staff member asked with a puzzled look. I smiled, gathering my resolve, and said, Yes, that's right. I took a deep breath and firmly pushed open the doors to the venue. As I stepped through the entrance near the family seats at the back, where the bride's father was sitting, every pair of eyes turned toward me in an instant. The weight of their stares was suffocating, but then I remembered the encouraging words of my friend, and I regained my composure. My parents, oblivious to my presence, were still spinning their fabricated tales about me. But my sister, seated at the high table, immediately spotted me and shot to her feet. Before she could say a word, I raised my voice, louder than ever before. I am Indigo, the bride's sister. It took me a while to get back. Yes, hell was quite warm. I sweated a lot. The entire venue went silent. Oops, my mistake. Not hell. I was in heaven, right? It was a brain disease, wasn't it? I tilted my head playfully, though my heart was pounding in my chest. The room froze, the shock palpable. My sister was the first to snap out of it. Who are you? My beloved sister is no longer in this world. How dare you make such a cruel joke? Someone get this person out of here! Briar shouted from the high table, her face twisted in rage. It seemed they were desperate to expel me before anyone realized what was happening. But then, a voice cut through the tension. Indigo? Is that Indigo? Magnolia slowly rose, her eyes wide with disbelief. She staggered towards me, and I could see the shock in her expression. Indigo? Is it really you? Indigo? Oh, I'm so relieved. I couldn't believe it when they said you had died. Magnolia's hands trembled as she grasped the edge of my dress. I held onto her hand tightly, steadying her. Magnolia, it's me. Indigo, your beloved Indigo, I reassured her. Oh, Indigo, thank you, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. I quickly wrapped my arms around her, helping to steady my grandmother. My aunt, Magnolia's sister, rushed over, worry etched across her face. Indigo, are you really okay? You're not ill? she asked, concern flooding her voice. While supporting Magnolia, I nodded at my aunt's worried expression. After handing Magnolia over to my aunt, I surveyed the room again. The groom's side was buzzing with confusion, and even the groom appeared stunned. The bride's side, especially my parents and Briar, was visibly shaken. Straightening the wrinkles in my dress, I drew in a deep breath and stepped forward, gathering my courage. Thank you all for gathering here today. I apologize for the inconvenience at such a joyful occasion. I am Indigo, the bride's sister. I was supposed to be here today, but my sister and parents told me to leave because they were planning to tell everyone that I suddenly passed away. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. I hope you can understand my desire to avoid shocking my beloved grandmother. Indigo, Magnolia whispered hoarsely, her voice barely audible. I was denied by my own family because I could not live up to their expectations. I continued, my voice steady, though my heart was heavy. From a young age, I was constantly compared to my sister and made to feel inferior because of my appearance and abilities. Wait a minute! My father's voice cracked, his face pale with disbelief, but I ignored his outburst and pressed on. My sister, perhaps influenced by our parents, or maybe it's just her nature, always cast me as the villain. Whenever she caused trouble, the blame was shifted to me. I was the one who bore the consequences for her actions. That's not true, my sister interrupted my statement. As the attention shifted to her, she began to tremble and tears started to flow. Ladies and gentlemen, it's embarrassing to say, but my sister has a habit of lying. This caused me to hesitate to invite her to the wedding, and I ended up falsely claiming she had died. I apologize for that lie. Briar, the groom, confused but supportive, stood by my sister. Amid the confusion, with attendees unsure of whom to believe, it was Magnolia who changed the atmosphere of the room. How disgraceful! Her strong, deep voice resonated throughout the venue. You have always bullied Indigo. Do you even have a human heart? But Magnolia, don't make excuses. It's disgraceful. Don't shame us further. Under Magnolia's stern rebuke, my sister trembled. I'm leaving now. I didn't want to attend this ceremony originally, but I came because I thought Indigo would be here. I should not have come to such a pitiful event. Indigo, let's go home. Magnolia warmly grasped my hand. I wanted to say more, but the warmth of her hand soothed my heart. Yes, let's go home. As we were leaving the venue, I heard my mother making a clumsy excuse. Briar's grandmother has been getting a bit forgetful. I quickly closed the door behind us to shut out her words. Indigo, come to my house tonight. I'll make your favorite donuts, Magnolia said gently as she stroked my hand. Yes, thank you, Magnolia. Relieved by her words, I clung to Magnolia and cried. Shortly after, all the relatives on my father's side left the venue. They were fed up with my sister and parents' reprehensible actions and had lost all desire to celebrate. Indigo, I'm sorry. I knew you were being treated harshly but couldn't intervene in family matters. I should have supported you more. My aunt apologized tearfully. As I comforted her, stroking her back while she cried, I understood that it's hard to interject in another family's affairs. Ultimately, I left the venue with my father's family. I hadn't told everything to my parents, but I felt proud that I had faced the situation head-on without running away. While relaxing and enjoying donuts at Magnolia's house, chaos ensued back at the wedding venue. My sister and parents argued to the groom's side that I was an uncontrollable person and that Magnolia was experiencing cognitive decline. However, since a large part of my father's family had already left the ceremony in protest, few believed their claims. Their repeated excuses only deepened the bad impression, and many guests left the venue one after another. During this, the groom stood by dumbfounded while his parents apologized to the remaining guests and encouraged them to head home. Visibly angry, my sister and my ever-changing parents declared, "We will recheck the facts and consult with the appropriate authorities if necessary," before leaving the scene. As the venue emptied, my sister and parents showed no signs of self-reflection. Under the watchful eyes of the staff, blinded by their misconceptions about me, they angrily headed to my apartment in the neighboring state where I live. But at that time, I was leisurely enjoying donuts at Magnolia's house, soaking in a warm bath, so I wasn't home. My father, frustrated that the door wouldn't open, kicked it, and my sister picked up stones from around and shattered the windows. A concerned neighbor thought the disturbance was suspicious and called the police, resulting in the arrest of my parents and sister on the spot. Shocked by the call from the police and the landlord's story, I was reassured by the landlord's sympathy, who encouraged me, saying, "You are a decent person. This is just unfortunate." After explaining the circumstances behind my family's actions to the police, they sympathized and recommended that I stay with relatives for my safety. Later, I met with the family that was supposed to become my sister's in-laws and apologized for the chaos at the wedding. I offered to pay compensation, but they refused, saying, "You have suffered as much as us. The truth about her came out before the marriage, which is fortunate," said the man who was supposed to be her husband, showing a helpless smile. He had contacted a detective agency immediately after the wedding to investigate my sister's past. The investigation revealed numerous falsehoods spun by my sister and parents. One such lie was that my sister attended a prestigious university and graduated, which I had also believed. However, I was surprised to learn that she had dropped out after 2 years because she tried to get close to a married professor for better grades and was subsequently sued by his wife. She boasted about working at a large corporation, but in reality, she was only working part-time at a convenience store inside the company's building. Breyer, even while working part-time, got close to a married man who visited her workplace and was sued again by the man's wife. After losing her job, she met the groom. He quickly took a liking to Breyer and was not concerned about her educational or employment history. The groom's parents were not fixated on a profession as a doctor and accepted their son's choice of partner. However, Breyer's lies were eventually exposed, leading to the annulment of the engagement, and she was told to never come near again. Breyer and my parents were left with the weight of their debts, 2 previous lawsuits, the wedding expenses, the honeymoon, and a new home. On top of that, repairs for my apartment added to the financial burden. Facing a total claim of around $100,000, they sought help, but were rejected by my father's relatives and mocked by my mother's family. "We cannot lend such a large amount to a liar," they sneered. My parents and Breyer continued to blame me, calling me ungrateful and labeling me a failure. But I was no longer afraid of them, the same family that had once left me yearning for love and acceptance. The child who cried for affection and wanted to belong no longer existed. When my father, veins bulging from his forehead, screamed at me to take responsibility for ruining their lives, I remained calm. "And how exactly do you expect me to do that?" I asked, my voice steady. He faltered, speechless. My mother and Breyer tried to speak, but their words failed them. "How can you sue someone you ignored as a child and treated as dead as an adult?" I challenged, watching them struggle for a response. There was only silence. "Maybe I should be the one to sue you. Do you want me to increase the compensation?" I pressed, watching their frustration mount as they choked on their words. Whether they would actually take legal action remained uncertain, but I knew this was the one thing they could no longer control my response. The fallout from the broken engagement and the police incident, brought on by my family's behavior, had already spread to my father's workplace. It threatened his professional reputation, and the people who once intimidated me now appeared foolish and pitiable. Time hadn't solved anything. It was simply that their values had become irrelevant to me as I grew up, and they no longer had any power over me. My family had stopped seeing me as a source of money when they nearly depleted their retirement savings. It was a bitter decision for them, but an inevitable one. Breyer, once their pride, now carried a tarnished reputation and was shunned by society. The shock on my parents' faces as they watched her fall from grace revealed the shallowness of their expectations. Breyer, once the center of their world, had lived in a bubble of self-centeredness, but now her foundation had crumbled, and her temper had become erratic and unstable. If my parents could honestly confront their mistakes and humbly try to change, there might still be hope for them, but the likelihood of them developing that kind of humility seemed slim. I made the decision to leave it all behind. I quit my job and moved to a quiet rural town with my beloved grandmother. There, I found a job at a small but warm company, and I began living a peaceful, fulfilling life. My days became an illustration of contentment, shared through my blog and Instagram as a daily diary. The serene moments of my life with my grandmother slowly gained attention. Many people commented that they found healing in the cozy, simple daily life we shared, and my following grew to tens of thousands. There was even talk of turning my diary into a book, and I found myself living in a dreamlike state, overwhelmed by the unexpected success. "Your drawings really warm my heart," my grandmother said, gently stroking my head with the same loving touch she had always given me. While the social recognition was gratifying, it was the sight of my grandmother's smile that brought me the most joy. I felt incredibly fortunate to be able to share this happiness with her. It was a life I never expected, but one I now cherished deeply, filled with gratitude and contentment. I truly felt lucky to have been born into this life, surrounded by warmth and love that was real. Indigo's relationship with her family is complex and deeply painful, marked by emotional neglect and systemic favoritism. Throughout her life, she has been subjected to emotional abuse, primarily from her sister Briar and parents. Their dismissive behavior, as seen in their treatment of Indigo at her sister's wedding, highlights the psychological toll it has taken on her. The constant comparison, belittling remarks, and exclusion have left Indigo feeling invisible and unworthy. Indigo's decision to attend the wedding, despite knowing how her family views her, reflects a deep-seated need for validation, even if it is from those who have consistently rejected her. However, the ultimate realization that her family, especially Briar, has no regard for her feelings is what drives her to confront the toxic environment. This turning point is a culmination of years of psychological damage, leading her to make the empowering choice to stand up for herself. The choice to leave and start a new life with her grandmother is a profound act of self-care. It signifies Indigo's psychological healing, as she removes herself from the source of trauma and surrounds herself with unconditional love. This decision not only symbolizes her reclaiming control over her life, but also marks the beginning of her emotional liberation. Willow's post on Instagram, and the subsequent support from her followers, reinforces the idea of self-worth independent of her family's approval. Her online community provides the positive reinforcement that she has been deprived of her entire life. This shift in her support system is crucial for her healing process, illustrating the importance of finding validation from healthy sources. Do you think Indigo should ever reconcile with her family, or is it better for her to maintain her distance for the sake of her mental health? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.